Hey everyone, welcome to another session of Flight School. My name is Noah Barnett. I'm the VP of Marketing here at Feathr, and thank you for being here. I love all the input prior to today's session. We are excited to host this session on email marketing. It's one of our most popular sessions that we host, and I think it's popular for good reasons because email marketing is still one of the most effective channels we have as marketers, as nonprofit marketers, association marketers to really connect our community with our cause. But email marketing has gotten quite complex over the past few years. And I'm going to share some data in a few minutes that really highlight this. But first and foremost, welcome to Flight School. If you're not familiar with Feathr, Feathr is the non-profit marketing platform. And so email marketing is a bread and butter of what we help over 1,500 nonprofits do. And the reason that's relevant is a lot of the insights and optimization strategies we're sharing with you today is based on what we've observed work well, not in just my experience in fundraising and nonprofit marketing, but also what we see work for 1,500 of our Feathr customers. And one thing we also get to do is we get to ensure that organizations are able to use email marketing to expand all aspects of their mission. Today, we're going to be talking about end-of-year fundraising, but we believe here at Feathr that marketing is mission critical for every aspect of your organization. And it can have an impact on the support you raise, like IJM, and how they help really end modern day slavery, or helping to raise increased awareness, like Pediatric Cancer Research Foundation, or even increase the number of individuals that benefit from the services the nonprofits use or offer, like Texas State Affordable Housing Corporation. Again, at Feathr, we believe marketing is mission critical. And as part of that, we host these sessions to help enable you. And again, today we're going to be talking about email marketing and how you can improve your email performance during the end of year. So let's get into it. We're going to share 8 ways to improve your email performance. But before we do, I want to set some foundation. Does anyone know what's going on in this photo right here? What is this depicting? What is this depicting? You can just share in the chat. What is going on in this picture right here? Mike says too much noise. Suzanne says it's Times Square. Absolutely, it is Times Square. Yep. Philster says Times Square. Fighting to be noticed. Christy says marketing. Commotion. Fighting for attention. Absolutely, Heather. Yeah, so the reason I share this photo is because it is a great example or depiction of exactly what the inbox feels like, especially the personal inbox. There's competition for attention everywhere. It's chaos, it's congested. You don't really know where to focus. And honestly, it can be quite overwhelming to the point that some, even myself some days, just avoid it. Often I just enter my inbox and I use it as a search query. I just type what I'm looking for. I don't even look at my inbox anymore because it can be overwhelming. And the reason I share this picture as we are thinking about how do we optimize email performance is because it's important that even though our objective as nonprofit marketers is that we want to increase the effectiveness of our email marketing, we first have to understand the environment that our emails are being received in. We have to anchor in compassion and kind of empathy for the environment we're trying to optimize in. Because once we know that, then we can infuse that in how we think about driving our optimization. And that's why I start here. So this is what the inbox is. This is what we're trying to optimize within. And so the question is whether we're going to just try to get a bigger billboard, maybe more flashy lights, or is there another way? And some of the optimization tips I'm going to share is, I believe, another way. Now, the other thing I wanted to focus on is 2 reminders, is that in this environment, in this Times Square inbox environment, Attention is the most valuable currency, and not just in the inbox, but in our connected economy. And that you're not competing for that attention just with other nonprofits or charities or organizations that are soliciting philanthropic investment. You're in this competition with everything, the 24/7 news cycle, the latest Netflix, binge series, the latest YouTube trends, TikTok. There's so many things competing for attention. And again, the question is whether we're going to continue to fight in that competition, or are we going to try to do something different? So as we're thinking about optimizing our email performance, it's not about just doing better emailing. It's about doing better email marketing. And so we have to anchor ourselves in the market first. And so that leads me to my next point, which is even though email is one of the most effective channels for fundraising still, and the way that we can connect with our audience, there are some competing benchmarks that we're seeing in email marketing. So the first is that email list sizes have decreased by 2% in the last year, after an 8 and 9% growth in the 2 prior years. So all I wanted to highlight here is that email lists are going down in size. The other thing we're seeing is that email revenue has actually declined as well. So email size go down, email revenue goes down. Now, for every 1,000 fundraising messages sent, nonprofits raise on average about $90, which is, again, a 15% decrease from 2021. Now, this seems really depressing, but there's a point to this at the end, I promise. Now, nonprofits' response to this is that we continue to send more emails. We sent 15% more emails in 2022 per subscriber than we did in prior years. So decreasing email lists, decreasing revenues, decreasing fundraising outcomes, increasing volume. And the average response rate continues to decrease as well, about an 18% decrease. Now, the dichotomy I want to highlight in these benchmarks is that as email becomes more and more and more difficult, nonprofits' response has been just to send more emails. And what I would like to invite you to do by providing these optimization tips is to focus on optimizing the relevancy of your messages and increasing the connection of your emails with your community, versus the alternative, which is just to send more emails. This is the traditional transactional approach. Things start getting harder and competition gets increased. Let's just do more. And what I would like to provide you is an alternative way on how do we actually optimize our way out. And that first really starts with your audience and your community. So if we're going to optimize our emails and we're not going to just opt to send more, we have to first start with who are we sending these emails to? And how do we think about segmentation in a way that's going to increase our effectiveness? So we can't optimize our email marketing unless we start with the market. Then we can get to the ings of this that we can optimize. And so there are 6 recommendations I'll make for how you can think about list segmentation. Some of these you may be doing already, others you might not. And so what I'm inviting you with this recommendation is just to think more focused with your segmentation this end of year as you're working on your email marketing performance. It actually means, that's a great question. I believe it means for each 1,000 emails sent, it's $90. But great question. Okay, so list segmentation. So a few ways that you can think about segmenting your audience to help improve your email performance is first and foremost around involvement. This is probably the most familiar way that people do segmentation, and likely maybe something you're doing today. But involvement means what level of involvement or investment has an individual had with your organization. The most common one is that you have individuals that have never given to your organization, and you have current donors. So you might segment non-donors, current donors. If you go one step further, you might have non-donors, loyal donors, and prior donors. And you might define loyal donors as someone who's given in the last 6 months or 12 months, and prior donors as someone who's given ever, but they haven't given within that loyal time period, or they haven't given as many. Another common segmentation is that you have non-donors, new donors, and loyal donors. So this might be people that have never given, people that have given for the first time in the last 12 months, and individuals that have given more than once in the last, X time period. So involvement's pretty straightforward. But again, the reason it's important to segment based on involvement is how you would talk to a non-donor would be different than how you would talk to a loyal donor. The second segmentation recommendation is around interest. And so this is just segmenting based on what someone has either previously engaged with or supported versus their involvement. So just because someone is a new donor versus a loyal donor, if we both support your advocacy programs and other donors support your adoption programs, you might differentiate that message and segment based on interest. The most common example that's usually used is that if you're an animal advocacy organization, you might have dog people and cat people. That might be a way that you can segment. Now, the typical question we get is, well, how do I segment on interest? One way is based on what someone has previously given to. And so you might have different program buckets, and that is the first way that you can measure interest. The second is that you can look at things like events and emails that you've put out into the environment and actually say, well, they attended our adoption fair, and so they are interested in adoption. Or when we look at our 50 emails we've sent this year, half of them have been around our adoption programs or program A, and the other half have been around program B. And you can actually look at which emails have they engaged with, which emails they've clicked through on. So you can go a level deeper and just look at behavioral interest, not just contribution interest. The third way that you can segment is based on intent. And so intent is typically based on the action someone's taken from a recency standpoint. So if I've been to your organization's website in the last 30 days, or I've been to an event in the last 30 days, I might have a different connection with you and your organization, even though I've been a loyal donor, than someone who's been a loyal donor that hasn't been connected with your website or been to an event in the last 30 days or 60 days. So intent is just this differentiation within a segment of the recency of a connection with them prior to this segmentation. And what that means is if you have let's say you have 1,000 loyal donors, you may want to segment them into high intent or high engagement or recency of engagement and low recency of engagement or lacking recency of engagement. Because again, the work or the friction involved in reconnecting with even the loyal donors that have not engaged recent would be different than the engaged loyal donor. Because you could email them and say, you are deeply engaged with our organization. Can we count on you again to support our end of year program? If yes, let us know here, Whereas someone that's a little disengaged, you might have to remind them of the investment that they've made previously as a pathway into inviting them to participate again. The recency of engagement will differentiate how you speak to them and how you try to connect with them. The fourth one is context. And so it's just, what is the context of the relationship? And so if I'm only a donor that has ever given to you through events, I might just say, oh yeah, I participate in the events that organization puts on. And so through that, you might speak to me differently than if I was like, oh yeah, I deeply am passionate and am an advocate for that cause that they work on. The context or how I would describe my relationship with your organization might be different. That's another way that you can segment. A little bit more complex of segmentation, but again, depending on where you're at and how you're optimizing your emails, that's another way you can do it. Last one here is relevancy. And so this could just be thinking through the connection points of a various of your audience with your organization. So the most common one I like to bring up is that if you have a group of individuals or donors that have recently attended an event, and you have a set of donors that haven't recently attended an event or have not ever volunteered, for example, the relevance of you connecting through the point of contact that leads the volunteer program or that led or emceed that event would matter for group A, but it would not matter for group B. And so you might want to segment those into two different groups, because you using or sending emails from like the MC of an event would only be relevant to this segment versus relevant. It would be irrelevant to this segment who never attended that event and doesn't know who, Michelle is, who emceed the event. And so you sending an email from Michelle to them wouldn't be as relevant. And so you would segment those groups out. Again, the reason we're focusing on segmentation first is because how you segment your audience is going to inform how you think about your optimization. Relevancy or segmentation reinforces purposeful connections and really builds trust. And so if we're trying to stand out amongst the noisy inbox, it's important for us to focus on relevancy over reach. And that's where hyper-segmentation comes into play. Now, again, you and your organization might just want to start small and segment into 2 or 3 groups. That's perfectly fine. You may already be doing that, and you might now have 9 groups. And that might be a way for you to improve your email marketing results. Key point here is, oh, Aaron, great question. I did skip over consent. What I meant by consent is how you receive their email address may inform how you want to connect with them. And so did you get their email address because they just donated, but they actually never requested you to email them? They just had to provide their email address? Or did they actually fill out a subscriber form that said, hey, keep me informed about topic A or B or C? And so consent meaning what is the point of connection that you receive their email address? You might also have a set of audience that is completely a prospect audience where you have their email addresses, but you're actually reaching out to them for the first time via email. And that would be a separate segment than, say, your loyal email segment that is like an opt-in only segment. Okay. Second thing I want to set the groundwork on. So segmentation is key before we optimize. The second one is what you are measuring success against. What you are measuring success against. Because when we optimize our emails, it's always in service of how we're measuring success. So there's 6 ways that you can measure email marketing success. And then there are 3 buckets of measurement on how you can think about email holistically. So the 6 measurements of success for email is delivery. So how many people are actually receiving my email? Now, delivery isn't intended to be like the delivery rate. Like 99% of the people I tried to email received my email. It's rather how many people do I have the ability to email? So if I'm optimizing for delivery, I want to make sure that my list is clean and that I don't have outdated email addresses or old email addresses. And so I'm keeping my email list clean. I'm also capturing email at every point of opportunity. And so if I'm sending direct mail appeals, am I including the ability for someone to include their email address on the reply device so that they can get my emails? Again, delivery would be focused on how many people was I able to actually send my email to. That might be a key success metric that you're measuring. The second one is going to be engagement. Historically, this has been really focused on open rates. Open rates now, based on a few changes in the last few years, has now been somewhat inflated. And so there's a new focus metric, which is around engagement, which usually is a combination of how long someone is engaged with your email when they do open it versus just being open. So instead of it being a yes, no, which was what open rates were, engagement's more of how long have they been invested in this email? And is that more than average than what the others are? And so you can measure engagement rate if, for example, you want to make sure it's not just that they're clicking through, but they're actually like reading your email. And so maybe they need to spend more than 5 seconds on your email, and that would be success. So it's not just about delivery, it's about engagement. Third one is going to be click-through rate. So how many people are actually opening the email, engaging with the email, and actually clicking through and going to your website, for example, or your donation page, or wherever you're trying to drive connection. That could be something you're optimizing for, and that would change how you would think about your optimization. Number 4 is replies. So this is something I think is underutilized in fundraising emails, but you can actually measure the amount of replies you receive to your emails. We typically don't think about replies because usually we are sending an email one to many. So when I'm a fundraiser or a marketer at a nonprofit, I'm sending an email, I'm going to send it to 1,000 people or 2,000 people or maybe 100,000 people. But that email is being received in a one-to-one context. Email is still a relatively intimate channel when I actually engage with the email. And so inviting someone to reply is actually an effective way to drive connection with that individual. It also increases your connection rates with them in the future via email, but that's a separate point. But optimizing for replies can be another thing that you're focused on. And again, how you design and how you optimize that email would be different if you're measuring success on the number of replies that you get. One great example I've seen with this is that I could send an email. My colleague Ellie is in the background right now, but I could say, hey, Ellie, this year we are looking to get 1,000 people to commit to being a part of our environmental protection program. You helped us last year. Can we count on you? If so, hit reply and let me know so I can add you to the count. Now, if Ellie replies to that email, she hasn't donated, she hasn't signed up for anything. But what you're doing is you're creating a social contract that increases the likelihood that Ellie will now make that commitment versus it being disconnected where I'm just asking her to go donate through a CTA. Because now I can actually follow up with Ellie and be like, hey, we received your reply, haven't seen your donation come through. Do you have any questions before you make that commitment? Because I've created this social contract. And so replies are actually a really interesting way that you can make email more personal. It can make a deeper connection between your community and your organization. Again, that could be something you're optimizing for. Based on what you're optimizing for will dictate how you optimize your emails. Number 5 is conversion rates. So this is what you would think it is. We sent 1,000 people emails. How many people did the action we intended them to? So we sent 1,000 emails, 50 people donated. So that would be, a 5% conversion rate that we would be looking for. If that is our objective, it would change how we think about optimizing the email. Last but not least would be revenue. And so instead of focusing on the number of conversions, it might be we sent 1,000 emails and we generated $100,000 in donations. So we're measuring revenue produced from our email marketing program. Now, the reason this matters is because what you choose to measure directly impacts what you choose to optimize. And so these are 3 examples that I'll give you, is that if I'm trying to optimize revenue per email, I'm going to want to make sure that that email has a direct CTA and that that email is designed to drive someone to take an action immediately, because I know that I'm only going to look at that one email and say, how much did email A generate in revenue? Now, in the second box is email revenue overall. I could say, hey, we're going to measure how much email or how much revenue did email drive over a 45-day period of time. Much more integrated results. I can actually vary the types of emails I send. So not every email has to have a direct CTA. I may say send one email that's just thanking someone to be a part of a program and thanking them for previous support, because I'm going to follow that up with a call to action email later. And I know that I'm measuring the results of my email marketing program on the collective outcome of email versus an individual email. The third bucket would be overall revenue. And so it's less about, hey, how much did email drive, and more of, we were trying to engage these 1,000 people. How much did they donate during a 45-day period of time? My email marketing strategy can now be more integrated into my other channels. I can have more holistic results, but I have a longer feedback loop. So again, what I choose to measure, 1, 2, 3, none of these are better than the other, but it's important to know what you're measuring before you start optimizing, so that you're not optimizing away from the outcome you're trying to focus on. So who you're sending it to and what you're measuring success against are important before we even start optimizing. So let's get into it. There's 8 optimization layers that we're going to run through in the next 20 minutes, and then we'll take some questions. I'm going to grab some water, and then we're going to get into it. Okay, so each of these optimization levers are not more important than the other, but they are, think of them as sandboxes that you can play in. And so we're going to go through the 8 sandboxes that you can play in. And the thing I would encourage you to do as we go through these is to think what you currently do within each of these sandboxes, what you assume to be a static variable, and what are the 2 or 3 tests you can run within each of these sandboxes. You may not actually do them, but just try to think through that. Okay, what do we currently do as it relates to this sandbox? What are some of the maybe defaults or statics that we have about this sandbox? And then what are 2 or 3 things that I could do within this sandbox during year end to experiment with, or that I might want to play with? Okay, let's get into it. So the first one is that you can swap the formats of your email. Typical example here would be is if you've always sent designed emails with a lot of photos and kind of graphical design, maybe try to send plain text emails. Maybe you currently just send one-off emails that feel disconnected, and instead you need to send a series of emails. So it's like, hey, I'm going to send these 3 emails in concert. And so I can design the emails as a series versus as a one-off. Think of it like a movie versus a mini series. There's an episodic approach to the format versus kind of a singular top to bottom storytelling. Here are 3 examples of different formats. One is very heavily visual, almost looks more like a poster. The other one is maybe you're more traditional in the middle, where it's like a header image. It says hello. It's very bright and colorful. It has a donate button, and then it looks and reads like a letter. And then on the third side, it almost looks like an advertisement, a digital advertisement where it's just like, hey, here's some text, double your donation. I don't have an example of a plain text email, but what I've found is that the format that most nonprofits experiment with least is just a plain email, like I wrote it on my iPhone. And the reason that can be successful is it feels very personal. It's like, hey, Ellie, thanks for all your support over the past 3 years. You've contributed over $5,000 to us. You and 287 other people have made a huge difference. Can we count on you again this year? Let me know by clicking here. Like, that could work better than your 3-week designed processed email. And again, we don't experiment with it because we make the easier the work, the less we do it because we feel like work should be hard sometimes. And sometimes that gets in our way of actually just doing the simple thing. So again, swapping format is an optimization layer you can do. You always want to make sure it's mobile first to ensure that your emails are optimized for all. So changing format is optimization lever number 1. So again, just to repeat, the workshop part of this is think about what you currently do as format. So what do your fundraising emails look like today? Now, second would be do you have a default template you always use or a design process for emails you always use? Write that down. That's okay. Just be like, oh yeah, we always do blank. And then maybe write 2 or 3 things that you would like to experiment with. Hey, let's try a plain text email this year. Let's try an email that reads more like a letter with a signature. Hey, we've actually never done this full visual poster design email type. Let's try that. Email poster design, just write those down in each of these optimization buckets. So what do you currently do? What's something you do by default? What are some ways that you can improve? Okay. Number 2 of the optimization layers is that you want to change up the sender. Now, this is one I find is the most sticky for organizations because they've never actually thought about it. They just have a default sender that all emails come from, and that's it. It's just like, oh, all emails come from our executive director. All emails come from the name of our organization. And that's a missed opportunity to improve your results. Here's a great example. So I support and am friends with the Adventure Project. It's a great nonprofit. Highly recommend checking it out. They really want to honor the dignity of people they serve by giving them ways to help themselves out of poverty versus only providing handouts. So it's a hand up versus a handout. One thing that they've done in a specific period of time, as you can see here, is they actually sent me 7 emails from 7 different from names. And it shows up. There's only really 2 things you see in your inbox before you open an email. There's the from name and the subject line. And we're going to talk about subject lines next. But what I love is that they just mixed it up. They said, your friends at the Adventure Project, Becky Straw, the Adventure Project, Becky, like just first name only. How many of you have sent an email with just first name only? The Adventure Project and hello from the Adventure Project. Now, I think the thing that's interesting here is that if you look at the 2 emails I've opened, both of them came from Becky. One was Becky Straw, the Adventure Project. And it's because Becky's a friend of mine. And so again, different things will resonate with different people. Sending it from a human isn't always the best thing. You might always send it from a human name like Ellie or Noah or Becky or Jonathan or Micaiah. And you should try sending it from your organization's name for certain segments. Again, all of this is play. It's a sandbox. So write down what you currently do for the sender name. Write down maybe something that is a static, like you don't even think about. The sender name is always blank. Or like, oh, we can only send emails from the executive director. We could never send it from the head of events or a program director. We could never do that. We would never do that. Write that down. Those are important. And then maybe write 2 or 3 experiments you would want to run here. Here's a great example of an email from WotC, an organization I support. where the email came from McKenna, and she said, McKenna from WotC. And then she sent me this beautiful email, and that was signed by McKenna. Again, these optimization areas are not levers. They're like optimization sandboxes. So who you send the email from may differ based on who you're actually sending emails to. The one I find the most impactful is like if you're trying to reach out to event attendees, and you're trying to convert them into donors, it might be better for that email to be sent from the MC of the event, not your executive director. They don't even know who your they don't care who your executive director is. But they do know that, Sam was up on the stage rocking it, and they were doing that, right? Like right now, you and I have a connection. You know who Noah is. Now, if I sent you an email from Feathr, you might be like, oh yeah, I think Noah works at Feathr and I attended a Feathr webinar. Or maybe you're a Feathr customer, so you have more context for that. But if you're first time on this webinar, your context with Feathr is anchored to me because I was the presenter on this. And so I would assume, or I'd want to experiment, our team would, that you would be more likely to open the email from Noah versus an email from Feathr. And you would definitely be more likely to open the email from Noah than from Ellie, for example. Because you don't know who Ellie is. Ellie's in the backstage right now. I can see her off stage. But you might not know that, right? And so, like, again, the sender name should be anchored to who we're actually sending and what the segment is. Okay, number 3 is the subject line. Dennis, I don't believe there's any best practices. There's only suggestions. And the best benchmark is your own results. So I'm also a rebel by design. And so when someone says something always works better or doesn't work better, I always want to try that because maybe it would work better for your organization. So Dennis, if research indicates that sending from an organization doesn't do as well, that logically makes sense. But maybe you have a set of donors that only know you by your organization's name, or they deeply are supported and loyal. And so they actually really care when something comes. And it's confusing if it doesn't come from the organization. Again, we never want to make assumptions as marketers. We only want to stay curious and continue to learn. Okay, number 3 is spruce up the subject line. Again, sender name and subject line are the only things we typically see. One thing I think is really interesting, and I've been a part of this, is I've spent 3, 4, 5 weeks going back and forth on email designs and email copy and like, should we change this word? And should we change that word? And then when we get it, we're like, masterpiece. And then we hand it off to someone and it says email number 1 and then has a bunch of copy. And that copy has been workshopped like crazy. But then we just leave the subject line up to be guessed. And I had a colleague once that said we should spend 50% of our time on the content of the email, and we should spend 50% of our time on who the email should come from, what the subject line, and who we're sending it to. Right now, I imagine in your organization, it's more of like 80 to 90% of the time focused on the content and 10% focused on who and what the subject line is. Highly recommend you rebalance that as you go throughout the end of your season. And here are some best practices. That doesn't mean they're the right practices. They're recommended practices. Is to use active words in your subject line, to include numbers, to keep it concise. You can even add emojis, be human, and stay personalized in your subject line. Now, the one thing I want to caution, and again, we'll send you a copy of the presentation so you can see all of this, is that you don't want to abandon your brand voice to optimize your subject line. You don't want to abandon your brand voice to optimize your subject line. And what I mean by that is if your organization tends to be more formal, you don't want to just drop a joke in the subject line. Because again, maybe your audience doesn't resonate with you as a brand that tells jokes. Or if you never use emojis, and that's kind of like embedded, you're like, no, we're stand-up people. We don't use emojis. Like, now I might encourage you to try it if it's just like, we don't use emojis because that's for the youths. But if it's just like, no, our brand voice is like, we don't do that. Like, this is what we're a part of. We speak very confidently. Maybe you have a high IQ donor base and like you just have a different format. That's totally fine. So when you're optimizing your subject line or any of your content, you don't want to abandon your brand voice, but you want to explore within the bounds of that brand voice and get creative and see what works well for you. Again, consider best practices as guides, not dictators. Guides, not dictators. Okay, number 4 of 8 is you want to mix up the content. So we talked about swapping out the format, but this is really about mixing up the content. And there's a bunch of different ways you can mix up the content of an email. The way I love to think about this first is you can actually change the point of view that you send an email from. So if I'm always sending a fundraising email from the desk of an executive director, I'm always speaking at my community and encouraging them to be a part of the cause we are working on. What if the email actually came from the lens of a program director who's on the front line serving beneficiaries? That might be interesting. What if it's from the point of view of another supporter of the cause? That could be interesting. And maybe it's actually from the beneficiary's perspective and sharing that back out. Again, you can tell stories and content from different points of view. You can also try narrative versus informational. You can try different lengths. I think, again, this is where we fall to best practices, where we're like, oh, email, like short attention spans, we got to keep it short and concise. That might not be true for you. It might be that if you have a long where you can actually tell like a full story, that keeps people engaged. They see that that's really important. Maybe you need to give them the data and the stats and have links out to research reports, different things. That might be what's required for you and your organization. Again, don't limit ourselves, but also experiment. Try short. Maybe you just need one sentence in an email. Could totally work. Hey, thanks for supporting last year. Can we count on you again? 300 other people have already said yes. Click here. Maybe that's it. Maybe that's all you need, like a text message almost. You can also try different mediums. So maybe using video, maybe using graphics, maybe using copy only. There's a lot of different ways that you can optimize your content. Again, it goes back to what do we currently do? What does most of our content look like? Oh, it's always written like a letter. It's always from the executive director's point of view. We just assume that it always should look like a letter because we came from direct mail and we just translate that to email. Huh, interesting. Okay. What are 2 or 3 things that I might want to try or play with in the sandbox of content optimization? Okay, number 5 is that you want to swap out the CTA. So CTA stands for call to action. Typically in most emails, you're going to have some sort of call to action that's driving them from their inbox to go somewhere else to have a more intimate transaction with you and your organization. I like to see it as like you're walking over the bridge into the inbox to find them, and then you're walking them across the bridge. The CTA is like the bridge to your cause. But one thing that we can do is we can always swap out the CTA. So we can maybe you have multiple CTAs in your typical emails. Maybe we just prioritize one because again, let's limit the what's it called? The confusion, right? Sometimes when you give someone 2 options, they're actually more likely to choose none versus if you only give them one option, they either have to say yes or no. And that's actually a better thing. We tend to be like, well, if they don't say yes to one, we want to give them a secondary option. So we include 2 CTAs. Again, you might just be confusing people. So if you always include 2 CTAs, just try one. You can also test out different CTA button copy. You know, we tend to fall into the curse of the familiar. Thus, we might always use donate now and maybe actually trying join us, count me in. Heck yeah. You know, I don't know. I'm not sure. But if we had decision fatigue, that's right. But trying something different might actually increase results. Donate now is not the only way to invite someone to make a donation. Also, join us might be too soft, and that's why you're not getting any donations. Lots of different ways to kind of blend this together. You might want to add social proof. This is one of the things I loved to test, is adding social proof near the CTA. And what I mean by that is at the point of decision, how do I reinforce that making this decision is a good idea? Now, first and foremost, it has to be a good idea because they're supporting the cause. But it also could be that you want to say, hey, 745 other people said yes last week. Wow, now I'm like, I don't feel as alone in making this decision. I can actually do this together. I can be 746. Heck yeah. You know, maybe it's 7. 7 people made this decision last week. I want to be number 8. Adding social proof near the CTA. It doesn't always have to be a number. It can also be a quote. Like it could be a quote from Ellie that was like, best decision I ever made was to donate to blah, 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 blah cause. Oh, wow. Ellie says so. Let's get in on it, right? Try something different. The other thing you can use is text links instead of buttons or design CTAs. So a lot of times we put these big blocks of text that look like big buttons, like easy buttons, and we think that's best. Maybe it's actually best to have just a link. We understand what hyperlinked copy does. And maybe we're more likely to feel like, oh yeah, I'm going to click on this and link. Try it out. You can also adjust the placement within emails. So here's great examples here. You can see the CTA in this one is in the middle of the email. On the right side, it's at the bottom of the email. Testing different things is going to be helpful. Okay, number 6 is around timing and frequency. There's a couple things that you can do here is, let's say I always send emails on Tuesdays, mornings at 9 a.m. Because some article one time said Tuesday mornings at 9 a.m. are the best time to send emails. That might not be true for your organization. You might actually get the best results on Sunday afternoon at 3 p.m. But unless you try that, you don't know. And so I think what I encourage here is that thinking about when to send emails is really important. Also, the quantity of emails you send versus the can be more for some segments and less for others. It's just trying different things. Often we make too many decisions on behalf of our community where we're like, oh, we're sending them too many emails. And that's just because we've decided we're sending them too many emails. No one said anything. The other thing that we encourage, and this is something you can do if you're a Feathr customer, is you can do dynamic timing of emails. And what I mean by that is you can do something called smart sends, where instead of sending emails at a fixed time, like Sunday at 3 p.m., I could actually say, I want to send this email to someone when they visit our website. And so when I visit our website, your organization's most top of mind, I want to send an email at that point in time so that when I go back to my email, I'm going to see your email. And so using smart timing is actually a really effective way to increase optimize your emails as well. Running out of breath a little bit. The other thing that you can do is something we call auto sends, where basically you can say, hey, I want this email to be delivered to everyone on my email list by November 18th at 3 p.m. However, if anyone clicks on an ad or maybe engages with our website or does something else between now and then, I want them to receive this email immediately. And so this idea of dynamic sends or like smart auto sends enables you to send the right email at the right time to the right people, but then still make sure that all the people on your email list get the email by a specific time. This is a great opportunity to really say, hey, let's take the guesswork out of when I should send the email and let my community's behavior actually inform when I send that email. Right timing and frequency always depends. There's no right answer here, and it might differ per different segments. It may be that you want to send an email, a fundraising, let's say you have a core group of volunteers and they always volunteer on Thursdays. Because you know they volunteered on Thursday night, the best time to send them an email might be on Friday morning, right after they get back up and they're reflecting on their experience volunteering with you. That might be the best time for that segment. Whereas if you have primarily a professional group, it might be better to send it during the workday because they are in their inboxes more during the workday. You're sending to maybe more of young parents where they're really just checking their email before bed at 10:30. Maybe actually sending an email closer to bedtime might be better because that's when they're checking their emails. Again, all of this is an experiment that you have to do, and it really should be benchmarked to who you're sending emails to. Again, just a sandbox you can play in. Okay, number 7 is that you should test. I've been mentioning this throughout, but this is super important. All of this is just experimentation. So the best way to optimize your email results is to test. And there are 3 types of tests that you can run. There's a test called a try. So, hey, we're just going to try something new. Like we're going to change the subject, we're going to change the sender name. We don't know if it's going to work or not, but we're just going to try it and see what happens. The other type of test is a pilot. So, hey, we have a hypothesis that if we try plain text emails for every 2 designed emails we send. So we're going to send 10 emails. We're going to send 2 plain text emails and 8 designed emails. We believe that's going to produce 20% increase in results because the plain text emails are going to have the highest conversion rate, but the designed emails are going to continue to reinforce care for the cause or like stories about who we're helping. that would be a pilot. We're going to run the pilot, and we're going to then compare the actual results versus the hypothesis. The last type of test is an experiment. So it's more of a control A/B group. Tammy, great question. Ellie, if you can capture Tammy, maybe we can have someone follow up with Tammy after, and we'd be happy to show you where that is. There's a few different things. There's smart sends, I believe it's called in the product, and then there's auto sends. Auto sends are you want to send this email based on a specific trigger, and then smart sends are what I call dynamic sends. So I think it's called smart sends in the product, Tammy. That was my mistake. But Ellie is going to make sure someone connects with you afterwards, Tammy. So three types of tests. What's great about this is it gives you shared language amongst you and your team of what type of test you're running at any given time. Hey, we're just trying this. Hey, we're piloting this. No, we're actually experimenting with this. Last but not least, most people will not engage with your emails. Isn't that annoying? We just talked for 50 minutes about how to optimize emails. And then I end on the fact that most people will not engage with your emails. It's just the truth. No matter what, you could send more and more emails. You could send the best emails. You could send emails from Winnie the Pooh. Most people are not going to engage with your emails, and that's just a fact. And so my last tip that I have here, and I think this is something that I believe wholeheartedly because I've seen it play out and improve results drastically, is that we always want to run multi-channel integrated campaigns. Sometimes this is called omni-channel campaigns. And that when we're emailing a specific segment of our audience, we also want to then be doing other things with that audience through different channels. So I could be doing email plus digital advertising. I could do email plus social media. I could be even doing email plus direct mail. I could do email plus ads plus emails, meaning I'm actually sending emails to a group of our audience. I'm targeting that same audience with advertising. But then when someone opens my email or comes to my website, I'm sending a different set of emails. So again, when we use multiple channels, we typically see about 200% increase in results. 200% increase in results. And so the best way to optimize your emails is to do everything else I said during this. But number 8 is one of the most important, is to ensure that you're using multiple channels to connect your audience or to connect your community to your cause. And yes, not even Winnie the Pooh. I actually have Winnie the Pooh here with me, helping me get through this webinar. So that's why I was brought top of mind. But I digress, and we want to get to questions. So if you have questions, let me know in the chat. But some of the best ways to use multi-channel is to use what's called email mapping. If you're a Feathr customer, you have access to this today, where you basically create your email list. You're sending your emails, but then you can use that same email list to run digital advertising and social advertising. So while they're in their inbox, they're going to see your message. While they're wandering the web, they're going to see your message. And while they're scrolling social, they will see your message. Last but not least, my last reminder for you is, as you are working through your end of year campaigns, I highly encourage you to take the great advice of Miss Frizzle, one of my favorite childhood heroes, is just to take chances, make mistakes, and get messy. That's the beauty of marketing. We do not have to be right. We do not have to be perfect. We are high performers, but we're not perfectionists. We can stay curious. And so take chances, make mistakes, and get messy. Play in these sandboxes and let us know how it helps you improve your email marketing. Again, thank you all so much. As a reminder, we have this great digital marketing toolkit for year end. Highly encourage you to just scan the screen now and download that. But with that, I'll open it up for questions. Feel free. Actually, Renee, in this toolkit, you can get examples of digital display ads. Danny says, for donors that give in an end of year campaign, do you have an opinion on pulling them out of the rest of your end communications or leaving them in? Danny, my recommendation to you is you should expect people to give to you throughout the end of year campaign. And you should have a plan for how to follow up with them, because you're expecting people to qualify for that category. So I think what I would recommend is you should continue to communicate with them during end of year. You should not keep sending them the same messages you're sending to people that have not given to your end of year campaign. you should have a new plan that keeps that momentum going. For example, if Ellie gave to my end of year campaign and I'm like, yes, I expected someone to give to my end of year campaign, so I had a plan for that. Now my follow-up might be like, Ellie, you're in. Can you share this video with 5 other colleagues? Maybe it's actually activating her to be an advocate now that she's been a part of it. Maybe I also want to use the momentum and say, hey, Ellie, you gave a first-time gift to our end of year campaign. We're so grateful for that. Some of our best supporters help us every single month by converting their one-time gift into a monthly gift throughout the next 12 months. Would you sign up for a $20 monthly gift starting in January? Again, keep the momentum going. You should expect people to give to your end of year campaign. And so you should have a plan for how you're going to follow up with them. And the plan shouldn't be to take them out or leave them in. There should be a separate plan for them. That's the best advice I can give you for that, Danny. Ellie dropped a great thing in here for end of year toolkit. Highly recommend checking that out. Also, some of you have been listening to this and you're like, I want support here. I want to improve my email marketing. I want to improve my marketing overall. I don't know what Feathr is, or I'm not sure exactly how Feathr can help. But my current software is broken and I need something different. We would love to chat with you. So if you're not currently a Feathr customer and you want to learn more about how Feathr can specifically help you improve your marketing and better run and report on all of your marketing efforts, do digital advertising, do better email marketing, put a 1 in the chat. Now, if you're in a different category where you're currently a Feathr customer, kind of like Tammy was, and you just want to learn how to use Feathr better to improve your email marketing results or your overall end of year fundraising, put a 2 in the chat. And what we'll do is then Ellie and I will coordinate with our teams to make sure the right people follow up with you to get you to next steps. So if you're not a Feathr customer and you want to explore how Feathr can support you, put a 1. If you're currently a Feathr customer like Tammy, then put a 2. And we would love to follow up with you to make sure that you can maximize your use of Feathr going forward. See a bunch of contributions in here. Thank you all so much. Again, if you're not a Feathr customer and you want to learn more, put a 1. If you're like Tammy and you're already in the Feathr family, put a 2, and we'd love to follow up with you on how we can better support you. So grateful for everyone being here. Again, take chances, make mistakes, and get messy this year end. And until then, I'm grateful, and we'll be back again next month with another version of Flight School. We also have a great session next week where I'm going to be interviewing some industry experts on fundraising tips. So feel free to look for that in the follow-up email as well. We'd love to see you back here next Wednesday. Ellie, I think that's it. We're going to hit the tunes and work our way out of here. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day. So appreciate you. And we'll talk to you again on the next Feathr Flight School.